a tutorial in Word that was about 12 pages, and I fed it through GPT 3.5, and I couldn't consume the whole entire thing. So basically, 128 tokens is actually not that much. It's probably only about 5 to 10 pages, depending on how dense your actual text is.
Okay, so a million tokens is not even a book.
No, nowhere near a book. Yeah.
Okay, so I can't feed in War and Peace and say, okay,
No.
write me another Tolstoy book.
I mean,
Welcome to Practical AI, everybody. My name's Jeff. I'm with Peter Lynn. This is season 2 of Practical AI, and we are sponsored by Pocket AI. Pocket AI is a tool used to perform surgery on your models to make them better. While everyone today is talking about RAG and refinement, Pocket AI allows you to edit the weights of your model directly. Peter, today's topic is in-context learning. So I won't say much here or ask too much. Just tell us about in-context learning. What is it and why is it relevant?
yeah. So I thought this was a good topic since our previous conversation on how to prompt engineer to get the best results. And the video at the end, the punchline was don't use LLMs if you don't have to because they're unpredictable. And so one thing is that video didn't use this term in context learning. And what it really is you're giving it a highly engineered prompt by giving examples. And then once you have examples, you tell it, here's my question and give me an answer, but here's my guardrails. Right. So that's exactly what he was doing in his example, but he didn't call it in context learning. And what in context learning is really, it's not updating the model weights. So the model itself isn't actually improving over time. You're just giving it as many hints as possible.
Okay, so this in-context learning is essentially what you're doing is you're using, we discussed a couple months ago or whatever, the idea of the context window. And the context window is basically how big of a prompt can I give this thing to get the answer I want, right? And so this whole notion of in-context learning, since the weights aren't changing, the model's not actually, different before or after you ask the question, the learner in this case is actually the user. The user is using as much kind of context to try to engineer the best possible response. So you said you might provide 3 examples of this is kind of what I want your response to look like, Mr. ChatGPT. And now I'm going to ask you a question. Boom, go. All of that is under this umbrella of in context learning. Is that fair?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So like prompt engineering includes a whole bunch of other techniques, but to get the best results for in-context learning, you give it examples or reference material first. And then you tell it, based on what I've told you, give me a response to this question.
Is there a difference between prompt engineering and in context learning, or are they synonyms?
They're well, so broadly speaking, they're all prompt engineering methods.
Okay.
But in-context learning is a very specific set of design patterns you use and how you design your prompt. So like there's chain of thought, which is another technique where you chain together a bunch of questions in order to get a better result. There's tree of thought that tries to logically organize the things you want to ask the ChatGPT to give you a better result. And so in context learning is a little different in that it provides examples or external references and it tells it to go read that stuff. And
Okay.
so the box is much smaller.
And do these methods, that broadly, the sort of prompt engineering and even in context learning, do certain models handle them differently and work better with some or the other? Or is it basically if you do in context learning question or whatever, a method approach with Gemini, it'll work the same with Claude, it'll work the same with OpenAI's product.
Yeah, so in the benchmarks that they've all published, they've all used prompt engineering and in context learning as ways to improve the accuracy or improve the benchmark result. And so there's like one shot and multi-shot. So that's in context learning. When you see benchmarks where they say multi-shot,
Mm.
they're talking about as they've used either chain of thought, tree of thought, or in context learning to score better on the actual benchmark itself.
With OpenAI's newer version, did they raise the context window so that you can play around with this in context learning even more?
Right. So the everyone's rushing to try to get the context window up over a million, but
Million what?
a million tokens.
Okay. And so what's it at now? What's ChatGPT?
I think they're at 128, I think, is the last time I looked. It might be a little bit higher, but it's a 128, and that's what Llama 3 3.1 is at, is 128.
128,000 or just 128?
128,000.
Got it. Okay. So like give us some idea. What could I do with 128,000 tokens in context learning? What could I do? Am I giving
Well, so for
sample white
example, I
papers?
wrote a tutorial in Word that was about 12 pages, and I fed it through GPT 3.5, and I couldn't consume the whole entire thing. So basically, 128 tokens is actually not that much. It's probably only about 5 to 10 pages, depending on how dense your actual text is.
Okay. So a million tokens is not even a book.
No, nowhere near a book. Yeah.
Okay. So I can't feed in War and Peace and say, okay,
No.
write me another Tolstoy book.
I mean, you could probably feed in like a 50 to 80 page book
If you had a million.
if you had a million, but again, it depends on, which author. If it's like Stephen King, probably not, because he's a
Yeah.
really dense in his writing, right? Like his paragraphs have, have very few line breaks.
Yeah.
Whereas if you feed in like Shakespeare, well, 50 pages of Shakespeare is not a lot.
Okay. So in context learning, this is to me it seems like almost like a hack. It's like a way to get what the answer that you want, but whatever. It's important and people are doing it. So where does this go? Like why is in context learning important today and or in the future and where's this going?
So it's important today because actually training the models takes 12 to 16 months. And if you need better results today, you can't wait 12 to 16 or 18 months. And that means that, okay, how can you get usable results today with GPT 4.0 or Claude or Llama 3 or Gemini, right? Like you can't wait 18 months in order to actually try to see if it works. So if your current experiment or your current project is getting kind of poor results, you can use prompt engineering as long as it fits in the context window and as long as your wallet or your budget allows for you to pay more.
All right, so let me ask a question that I may not have thought through very well, but when I'm in a conversation with Gemini or ChatGPT, um, and I'm like, no, that's not what I meant. I'm looking for this. Is that history part of the an in context learning? Is it in the context window still, or
Great. So
is
your
it
actual conversation, as you correct it, you're doing in context learning because every time you ask the language model, the whole entire prompt is fed into it. So you ask a question, you get a response. The next time you ask something else, the whole thing is fed back into the model to get the next response. And so you're always passing everything in.
okay, got it. Okay, so is the future just huge context windows and more in context learning and us getting better at sort of figuring out how to get the answers we want out of these things, or is there a different future?
I mean, I would hope the future is better than that because I mean, ultimately, We need a better approach that doesn't require you to have more and more memory and buy more and more NVIDIA GPUs. I'm sure Jensen would love that, but practically speaking, that doesn't scale very quickly.
Okay, so ideally, the models get better at answering these questions, or their answers are more nuanced or bigger, or they get to know you personally better and kind of what type of answers you understand. Is that part of the future?
So if you ask Apple, Apple's philosophy right now is we're going to train the model on your data specific to you, and then everybody has their own refined version of the model on the cloud. And then in theory, it should give you much better results because it's trained on your data. So it's your own personal, private, refined language model, right? So they're taking this extra step of you having to train and pay OpenAI for refinement of a model. They're just going to do it for you.
Got it. And they are that's one of the things that is interesting about Apple. They seem to have let other people waste or spend their money on these training these monoliths, and now they're basically saying, "Good, thank you. We're just going to do something different and cool with what you just did."
Yeah.
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 Well, this is good. This is an interesting thing. This is helpful for me to understand a little bit now because I've heard that phrase and the whole concept of prompt engineering and this and context windows, and this kind of brings it all together. Peter, thanks for the time. For those of you that are watching and listening, remember, we talk slow, so always do our YouTube videos in double time. That will get you through these in about 6, 7 minutes. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.